What you're watching right now isn't just another sanctions headline, it's a live stress test of how global power actually works. A single oil tanker, stopped in international waters, suddenly becomes a flashpoint between two nuclear-armed superpowers. The United States says this is law enforcement. Russia says it's illegal coercion. And, sitting in the middle, global trade, energy markets, and a fragile international system that depends on everyone agreeing on the same rules, even when they don't like the outcome. This case forces an uncomfortable question. Who really has authority at sea? Is it international law, flag states, or whichever country has the power to enforce its rules the furthest from its own shores? As you watch this unfold, pay close attention to the language both sides use, because enforcement, signaling, and deterrence often look identical on the surface, but lead to very different consequences. And by the end of this breakdown, you'll have to decide, was this about compliance or about pressure? This is where the legal foundation matters. From Washington's perspective, sanctions are not optional guidelines. They're binding enforcement tools. If authorities identify a vessel connected to sanctioned networks, especially involving energy and finance, U.S. law allows intervention even beyond territorial waters. That's controversial, but it's not unprecedented. The logic is simple. If sanctions stop at borders, they don't work. But here's the tension. International waters are supposed to be neutral space. So when one country applies domestic law globally, it raises alarms for everyone else who depends on predictable maritime rules. Ask yourself this. If every major power enforced its own sanctions this aggressively, what happens to global shipping neutrality? This moment isn't just legal. It's systemic. Russia's response tells us just as much as the seizure itself. Notice how Moscow frames this not as a technical dispute, but as a violation of international norms. That language is intentional. By emphasizing crew treatment, legal procedures, and maritime standards, Russia is appealing beyond Washington to insurers, shipping states, and neutral countries watching closely. This isn't only about the tanker. It's about precedent. If Russia accepts this quietly, it risks normalizing a system where power determines legality. But here's the key question for viewers. Is this genuine concern for international law, or strategic outrage aimed at pushing back diplomatically? In geopolitics, both can be true at the same time. This is the collision point. Sanctions versus global trade trust. The U.S. argument is enforcement necessity. Russia's argument is rule erosion. And neither side is entirely wrong. Sanctions only work if violations have consequences. But global trade only works if rules are consistent and predictable. Oil has never been just a commodity. It's leverage. Every time a tanker is stopped, insurers recalculate risk, traders rethink routes, and markets quietly react. Even if prices don't spike immediately, confidence shifts. That's why a single enforcement action can ripple globally. This is why energy disputes are so volatile. They sit at the intersection of economics, security, and diplomacy. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Markets fear uncertainty more than confrontation. When rules feel flexible, capital hesitates. That hesitation affects everyone, not just Washington or Moscow. Amid all the power politics, it's easy to forget the crew. These are multinational workers who didn't design sanctions, didn't choose geopolitics, and yet bear the immediate consequences. Detentions, legal limbo, and uncertainty can last weeks or months. This is where moral credibility comes into play. Governments often argue legality, but legitimacy also depends on humane treatment. Ask yourself, should enforcement mechanisms include stronger protections for neutral workers caught in political crossfire? Because credibility is lost fastest when human costs are dismissed. This is the fork in the road. Analysts split between two interpretations, and both shape future behavior. If this is routine enforcement, expect more seizures. If it's strategic signaling, expect retaliation somewhere else. The danger isn't escalation overnight, it's normalization. When extraordinary actions become standard practice, miscalculation becomes more likely. So here's the key audience question. At what point does enforcement stop stabilizing systems and start destabilizing them? History shows that line is rarely clear until it's crossed. This section exposes the uncomfortable truth about international law. It works best when major powers agree, and weakest when they don't. There is no supreme maritime authority. Enforcement is fragmented, political, and power-dependent. When states rely on domestic laws beyond borders, legality becomes contested territory. And that's why disputes like this don't just resolve in courtrooms. They resolve through diplomacy, pressure, and precedent. The deeper issue here isn't this tanker. It's whether shared legal systems can survive in an era of rivalry. This case ultimately reveals more than a legal disagreement. For the United States, it reinforces the principle that sanctions must be enforced to remain credible. For Russia, it underscores fears of unilateral authority overriding shared rules. And for the world, it highlights how fragile the balance between enforcement and escalation has become. What happens next won't be decided by headlines alone, but by diplomacy, market reactions, and how often actions like this are repeated. Because once precedent hardens, it reshapes global behavior. Now we want to hear from you. Was this a lawful enforcement action, or a signal of deeper geopolitical pressure? If you found this case as compelling as we did, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more sharp, fact-based courtroom and geopolitical breakdowns.